Okay, Mr. Roubini, if I could begin by asking you of the impact of on the IMF of Dominique Strauss-Kahn's resignation at such a crucial time.
It's a negative impact because he was a real leader. He was key to the debates about what needs to be done in Greece, in Ireland, in Portugal, in the Eurozone, and therefore the fact that now his trouble implied there's not going to be a strong leader for the time being negatively affects the entire process of figuring out whether to bail in private creditors or whether to provide additional official money to the Eurozone economies under distress.
No, he hasn't been charged yet, and is his career at the IMF, his career at the IMF is of course over because he's resigned now. Did he have any choice in the matter? Is that something he had to do under these circumstances?
I don't think there was any choice at this point, you know. His legal issues are going to take a while, even if he's found eventually innocent. He will have to stay in New York, even if he receives bail. And therefore, you know, his name and reputation is damaged, regardless of whether he's going to be eventually found innocent or guilty of the charges.
And how will he be remembered as an IMF leader? Will this scandal overshadow everything else?
Well, certainly as a leader of IMF, he was a very strong leader, and it's going to be very hard to find somebody that understood economics, who had the political skills, the diplomatic skills, the charisma to make the institution stronger. You know, a couple of previous leaders had been disappointments, Kohler and Rato, and instead traditionally French leaders of the IMF, from Lagarde to Catherwood to now him, had been much stronger leader. So I think his legacy, at least as an IMF leader, has been one of a strong leader that made a difference. The institution was in decline when he arrived and made it actually critical and important to the global economy.
Now, moving away from these allegations, the role that he has played in the IMF has been crucial because of the nature of the bailouts that he has been overseeing, in Greece in particular. What difference does it make for Greece not to have him there anymore?
Well, there is a troika, that is the EU, the ECB and the IMF, that are in charge of figuring out what has to happen in Greece. And while the ECB has taken this extremely hawkish approach, that in my view is actually mistaken, that any debt restructuring or even reprofiling is going to be disorderly, the IMF, in my view, had a more balanced view. It was an honest broker that on one side recognized that there is trouble, that there may be benefits from a restructuring, and on the other side also recognized that then the risk of contagion. So it was going to provide technical expertise, first of all, and with his leadership also the political leadership to do whatever is necessary to address these problems.
Now, I'd like to ask you about possible replacements for Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Is it important at the moment that we have a European leader take over? There seems to be two distinct camps, those who think it should be a European leader and those who think that it's a turn for the emerging markets. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I would say it's important to have the best leader for the institution, and you need somebody who understands economics in a sophisticated way, financial market, who has policy and political experience, who is respected, and so on. And I think that's a key for the institution. Whether it's European or not is less relevant. I think that from a normative point of view, you have to just find the best candidate. From a practical point of view, I think that what's going to happen is that the Europeans are going to be united in wanting a European. And I think that the European candidate is going to be Christine Lagarde, who's definitely very smart, understands things, and is a political leader. The White House and the US are going to accept that because they don't want to give up on the leadership of the World Bank. And the emerging markets economies are going to be too fragmented. There are too many candidates, and it's very hard to find coalesce around one of them so that they can push for an emerging market candidate. So by default, it's going to be a European, and I think it's going to be Christine Lagarde.
You say it's less relevant if it's somebody from the emerging markets or Europe, but do you not think that Christine Lagarde, if she ends up being the candidate, would be more likely to look favourably on what needs to be done in Europe than perhaps somebody from the emerging markets?
Well, the question is what needs to be done in Europe is not clear. You know, my view, like the one of many in the market, is that an orderly restructuring of the debt of Greece now and possibly in future Portugal and Ireland is going to be necessary, desirable, and unavoidable, while these countries are still doing fiscal adjustment reforms and so on, because otherwise you'll have to fully bail out the private creditors and put all of the debt of these countries on the balance sheets of the official sector. That will be the mother of all moral hazards. But the ECB instead wants to take that tack of essentially not bailing in any of the private creditors and eventually have a full bailout with the Europeans taking over the debt of these countries. That to me, it doesn't make any sense from a substantial point of view in terms of moral hazard. Now, Christine Lagarde recently has made the argument that, you know, that the restructure will be a bad idea, but she's a very pragmatic personality and understands also the political trade-off. So it's a very hard to handicap what her views will be if she was IMF MD on these crucial issues of what to do. How much restructuring, how much additional official money, how much additional reforms. Ideally, a combination of all these things needs to be done, but one of the things necessary at this point is to stop kicking the can down the road and realize that some of these countries are insolvent, either the banks and or the government, and then an orderly, market-oriented and market-friendly restructuring is necessary and avoidable. Was done with the Brady Plan, was done in Ukraine, in Pakistan, in Uruguay, in the Dominican Republic, in Belize. There have been dozens of cases of friendly market offers in which you reprofile or restructure the debt, where you can contain the contagion. So the extreme view of the ECB is actually not warranted and is mistaken at this point.
Is your view that this should be done sooner rather than later? There do seem to be those who agree with you but think that it shouldn't happen until perhaps 2013 or 14.
No, it has to be done now because one, the program of Greece is off track. Two, they're not going to regain market access next year. They have a financing hole next year and the following year of 30 billion euro per year. So unless you go through the path of giving them more money, that means that their entire public debt, 320 billion euros, is going to be taken over by the official sector, and all their flow deficits for the next decade are going to be taken over by the official sector. That means that on top of the 110 billion euros of the current program, you have to give them another program of another 300 billion euros if you're going along that path of keep on financing them and bailing out the creditors and letting them exit and not bailing them in. And first for Greece, then for Ireland, then for Portugal. This is not a path that makes sense. You try plan A, if it doesn't work, you give it a chance to believe there was a liquidity problem, the conditional adjustment, reform, and austerity is going to restore market access, has failed. It's time to move to plan B. And if you don't move to plan B today, or this year, or early on, eventually you're going to have a disorderly default rather than an orderly restructuring.
Why, in your opinion, is the ECB so opposed to this?
But two reasons. One, they have a huge amount of exposure to now Greek, Portuguese, Irish banks because of their repo operations and the outright purchases of bonds. So they might be worrying in part about the losses that they themselves. But like the IMF, like the EFSM, like the FSF, they're on hook. This country cannot repay back the liquidity they borrowed from the ECB against the collateral, and the ECB is stuck to refinance these countries for the next 10 years. They have no option. They'll have to refinance at face value and be bailed in like it is the case for the IMF and the other official sector, maintain exposure, not reduce their claims, refinance them year after year, and maintain them at low interest rates. So that's one reason. The other one is that they were really, some of them, not everybody, but certainly Jean-Claude Trichet and Lorenzo Binismaghi, they've been so ideological that they have not even done their homework to try to figure out how you can make an orderly debt restructuring. And they've been repeating this mantra that doesn't make any sense, that even if you do reprofiling, let alone restructuring, you're going to have a disaster, contagion, bank runs, collapse of financial system. There's utter nonsense because there have been dozens of cases of orderly restructuring of sovereign debt. So by putting themselves in a corner of saying it's going to lead to disaster, they haven't even done the homework that they should have done to prepare themselves for Plan B. So they don't even know what Plan B is and how can you do it. And therefore now they're actually acting out, like Trichet did, storming out of a meeting and complaining about even an orderly profiling. So it's ideological blinders. That's what it is.
Mr. Roubini, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.